I didn't know my family was laughing when the first notification hit my phone. I was still in my dress blues, sitting alone in my car in the base parking lot, hands resting on the steering wheel like it was the only solid thing in the world. The ceremony had ended an hour ago. The hall had emptied. The lights inside my building were still humming the way they always did, indifferent to whether you felt proud or bruised or both. My phone buzzed once, then again, then again. I looked down, expecting a work alert, maybe a reminder about a briefing, maybe my supervisor sending a quick, good job. Instead, it was a comment under the Bases Awards video. A stranger had tagged my sister and typed, "Isn't this your sister?" That one sentence turned my stomach in a way I didn't expect because it wasn't a celebration. It was exposure. It wasn't a private moment I could carry quietly. It was proof, public, undeniable, impossible to tuck into a drawer. My name is Emily Carter and I serve in the United States Air Force. That sentence still feels heavier than it sounds, not because of the uniform, not because of the responsibility, but because of how many times it's been brushed aside, flattened into something smaller by the people who were supposed to see me first. Even now, with years of service behind me, I can still hear my father's voice in the back of my head, reducing it to something that didn't count. "You're just support," he'd say. "You're not really doing anything?" The email came in on a Wednesday afternoon while I was at my desk on base. Fluorescent lights. A government-issued chair that creaked when I shifted. A stack of folders waiting for signatures before closeout. The subject line looked like a dozen others I'd opened before, the kind you skim and archive without thinking. Quarterly Awards Banquet Official Notification. I clicked it. My eyes moved across the first paragraph, then stopped like they'd hit a wall. I scrolled back up, read it again. Slower. My supervisor had submitted a package for me weeks earlier. I hadn't asked. I hadn't expected it to go anywhere. Packages move up the chain all the time, most stall. Some come back with notes. A few disappear quietly like they were never there. This one hadn't. Wing had approved it. My name was on the list. I was being recognized with an Air Force Achievement Medal at the quarterly awards banquet. Commander's call, formal ceremony, families invited. Recorded and posted afterward on the Wing's Facebook page and the base YouTube channel, the same way they always documented recognition. Measured, professional, no drama, just the record. I leaned back in my chair and let the information settle. There was no rush of adrenaline, no urge to announce it to the office, just a deep, steady feeling in my chest. Not pride exactly, more like confirmation. The quiet kind that shows up when the people who understand the weight of the work finally acknowledge it out loud. After a minute, I picked up my phone. And I hesitated longer than I want to admit. Not because I didn't want my family there, but because inviting them felt like reopening a door I'd spent years closing carefully. Still, this mattered. And somewhere in me, a smaller, older version of myself wanted them to see it. Wanted them to understand that the thing they'd shrugged at for years wasn't a phase. It was my life. The family group chat looked unchanged. My sister Rachel at the top. My mother's heart reactions scattered through old messages. My father's last contribution, a thumbs-up emoji from weeks ago, dropped into the conversation like a punctuation mark that meant I'm here without having to mean anything else. I typed slowly. "Hey, I wanted to let you know I'm being recognized at a formal Air Force Awards banquet next Friday. It's a commander call and families are invited. I'd really like it if you could come." No exaggeration, no explanation, just facts. The typing bubbles appeared almost immediately. Rachel replied first, "Isn't that just an internal thing?" "Like admin work?" She added a laughing emoji. "We already have dinner plans that night, don't be mad." My throat tightened, not sharp, not new, just familiar. Then my father's message appeared. "Awards banquet for what? You're not an officer. Sounds like a secretary award if you ask me." I stared at the words until they blurred a little. I could feel my shoulders dropping just a fraction, the way they always did when I was reminded of my place in that family, quiet, convenient, easy to overlook. And then my mother reacted. Not a sentence, not a question, a thumbs-up icon under Rachel's laughing message. I stared at the screen longer than I should have. The office around me hummed, keyboards, printers. Muted conversations drifting down the hallway. No one noticed the way my chest went tight, the way my stomach dipped, the way I swallowed. The familiar urge to start explaining myself like that would fix anything. I could have explained. I could have told them what I actually did. I could have said my AFSC. I could have walked them through how information moves in a wing, how timelines break, how a single missing update can turn a smooth operation into chaos. I could have listed nights I stayed late so commanders had what they needed before problems became failures. I could have said Air Force Achievement Medal instead of award and watched them pretend it sounded more respectable. I didn't. There's a point where explaining becomes a kind of begging. I crossed that line years ago and never went back. I typed one line, "It's okay, I understand." Rachel sent a wine glass emoji. My father didn't respond. My mother's thumbs up stayed there like a stamp. I set my phone face down on the desk and went back to work. Growing up in Ohio, I learned early how to read a room and make myself smaller inside it. Rachel was 3 years older, louder, effortlessly confident. She took up space without apologizing for it, and my parents built their world around her momentum. School plays, sports banquets. Celebrations that felt automatic like gravity. I was the reliable one, the kid who didn't need reminders. When I won an academic competition in middle school state level, they handed me a certificate with my name spelled correctly, which felt important at the time. I held it carefully all the way home, smoothing the edges with my thumbs, imagining where my parents might hang it. My father glanced at it at the kitchen counter. "Good job," he said, already turning back to something else. That night I watched him slide the certificate into a hallway drawer, not a special drawer. The drawer with spare batteries, expired warranties, folded instruction manuals for appliances we didn't own anymore. The drawer you close without thinking. I didn't say anything. I just memorized the sound it made. Rachel's things went on walls. Mine went into drawers. My father valued outcomes he could explain quickly to other people. Promotions, titles, numbers, visibility. He used to say, if it matters, people will know about it. He meant status that didn't require context. My mother believed in harmony, or at least the appearance of it. She avoided conflict the way some people avoid bad weather, by stepping inside and hoping it passed. When my father dismissed something I cared about, she'd squeeze my shoulder later and say, "You know how he is," like that was an explanation and not a warning. By high school, the pattern was set. Rachel took center stage. I moved through the background, competent and quiet. Teachers praised my work ethic. Counselors said I'd do well anywhere. My parents nodded, satisfied I was low maintenance, a phrase they used like a compliment. I learned to translate it early. You don't require much attention. The first time I mentioned the Air Force, it was during dinner. I didn't make a speech. I didn't announce it like a bomb. "I'm thinking about joining after graduation," I said. My father didn't look up from his plate. "Why? I want something structured," I said. "I want to serve." Rachel laughed. "That's what people say when they don't know what else to do." My mother frowned. "It's dangerous." My father finally looked at me. "It's not a career," he said. "It's a stopgap." I remember nodding like I was considering his point, even though something in me had already decided. I didn't join the rebels. I joined because the Air Force offered something my family never had: clear expectations, clear standards. You either met them or you didn't. No guessing, no reading between lines. Basic training was hard in ways I expected and harder in ways I didn't. But it was fair. Effort mattered, precision mattered, accountability mattered. When I struggled, I was corrected. When I improved, it was noted. No one asked me to be louder or shinier. They asked me to be reliable. That felt like relief. When I graduated and sent a photo home in uniform, standing straight, name tape crisp, my mother framed it. She put it on a hallway shelf, not the living room, not the office, the hallway. My father looked at it and said, "So what's the plan after this?" After this, like it was a phase. Over time, I found my lane: coordination, information management, problem solving under pressure. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't meant to be, it was essential. I wasn't on recruitment posters, I wasn't in the photos. I was the person people called when they needed something done right the first time. My supervisor noticed early on that I didn't panic. When timelines shifted or information conflicted, I slowed down instead of speeding up. In our world, clarity under pressure is currency. She started giving me more responsibility, not loudly. Not ceremonially, just quietly handing me things that mattered. Take this, she'd say. Run, point, I trust you. Trust is the most honest form of recognition in the military. It doesn't come with applause, it comes with consequences. At home, none of it translated. When I visited on leave, my father introduced me to neighbors as working in the military, mostly paperwork. Rachel would nod along, smiling like she was in on a joke I didn't understand. My mother would smile and change the subject. I stopped correcting them because correcting them never changed anything. It just drained me. By the time I made staff sergeant, I stopped announcing promotions altogether, not because they didn't matter. Because every time I tried to explain what they meant, the explanation collapsed under the weight of my family's assumptions. If it didn't come with a corner office or a title they'd heard on television, it didn't register as real progress. So I learned to let my career unfold quietly. That's what made the awards email complicated, not because I expected a miracle. Because inviting them felt like offering one last quiet opportunity, not to celebrate me, but to meet me where I actually lived. They chose dinner. I pressed my uniform that night in silence, smoothing each crease with care. Not for them, for myself. I hung it up and caught my reflection in the mirror. Older, steadier, less willing to explain. The morning of the banquet arrived the way most important days do, quietly, alarm at 500, coffee that tasted like routine, the bass coming awake outside my window. I moved through my morning on autopilot. Shower, uniform laid out, ribbons aligned, shoes polished, insignia straight. In the military, preparation becomes a language. It's how you say, I take this seriously without announcing it. At work, no one treated the day like anything special. That was normal too. A quick good luck tonight from my supervisor. A nod from a colleague who knew what it meant but didn't dramatize it. Deadlines still existed. Emails still came in. The mission didn't pause for recognition. By late afternoon, I drove home and changed in silence. The apartment felt smaller with the uniform on, like the walls leaned in to listen. I took one breath and registered the distance between who I was and who my family still thought I was. Then I checked my phone. No new messages, no last-minute change of heart. No, maybe we can stop by after dinner. Just silence. I left anyway. The banquet was held on base in a hall I'd been in a dozen times for briefings and mandatory events. That night it looked different, tables dressed simply, flags at attention along the walls, a small stage at the front, a podium, a screen for slides. Families filled the room in clusters. Spouses adjusting jackets, kids fidgeting, parents looking around with that mix of pride and uncertainty that comes from being close to something formal and unfamiliar. I noticed those details because observation had become second nature. I took my seat with my unit. The chair beside me was empty. No one commented on it. The ceremony followed a familiar rhythm. Opening remarks, a measured overview of the quarter, recognition of collective efforts before individual names. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't meant to be professional, earnest. When my name was called, I stood, walked to the stage, and accepted the medal with a handshake and a nod. The weight of it was reassuring in its solidity, not symbolic, real, polite applause. A few smiles, cameras from public affairs capturing it for the record. I returned to my seat, heart steady, breathing even. It was over in minutes. Afterward, people mingled briefly. Congratulations exchanged. Someone joked about how long the speeches ran. A person asked where my family was. Couldn't make it, I said. No one pressed. That more than anything felt like respect. I left early, slipping out before the room fully emptied. The parking lot was cool and quiet, the sky settling into a deep blue. I sat in my car for a moment with the medal resting on the passenger seat, its ribbon catching the overhead light. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt complete. The next morning, the base posted the video. They always did. A short caption, a link to the full recording, a few still photos, nothing dramatic, just documentation. Colleagues shared it. Family members of other recipients tagged each other. A friend from a previous assignment commented, "Well deserved." I didn't share it myself. Around noon, my phone buzzed. A notification from someone I didn't recognize. A comment from a distant cousin with my last name. "Wait, is this Emily Carter from Dayton?" A minute later, another comment appeared. "Isn't that your sister? She looks different in uniform." And someone tagged Rachel. That was how it reached them, not through my invitation, not through my careful message. Through the kind of visibility my father always respected. I imagined Rachel at the table, dinner noise fading as the screen filled with a ceremony she'd chosen to skip. My father was leaning over her shoulder, reading words he hadn't bothered to ask about. My mother watched quietly, her face doing that careful thing it did when she realized something important had slipped past her. No music cue, no freeze frame. Just the slow, undeniable clarity of seeing me as I actually was, presented plainly without my commentary or apology. My phone rang that afternoon. "Rachel." I watched it ring until it stopped. Then my mother texted, "Why didn't you tell us it was a medal?" Not congratulations, not pride, just confusion edged with accusation, like the truth had arrived in the wrong packaging. I typed, "I told you what it was." 3 dots appeared. Disappeared, reappeared. Rachel texted, "You said the awards banquet." We didn't realize it was like this, formal, public. Documented. Then my father texted. Someone tagged Rachel. People were asking questions. I could picture his face, tight with irritation, not at his own words, not at his own dismissal. At the discomfort of being seen as the kind of father who didn't show up. "We look foolish," he added. There it was, the center of gravity in his world. Not "I'm sorry," not "I was wrong," just how it reflected on them. I exhaled slowly and replied, "I didn't do anything to make you look anyway. I invited you." The response didn't come right away. When it did, it was my mother. "Why didn't you explain better?" I stared at the words until something tired settled behind my eyes. Not anger, not sadness, recognition. This was the same question they'd asked my whole life, just dressed differently. "Why didn't you make us understand? Why didn't you translate yourself into something easier for us to accept?" I set my phone down and finished my workday. That night, they didn't text again. The next morning, nothing. Days passed. The internet did what it always does. The video gathered a modest number of views, comments from people on base, supportive notes from spouses of other service members. Nothing viral, nothing dramatic. Just a record that existed and couldn't be taken back. I went on with my life, and for the first time, my family's silence didn't feel like a punishment. It felt earned. Nearly 2 weeks later, my mother called mid-morning, which was unusual. She usually texted first. I watched the phone ring, considered letting it go, then answered. "Hi," I said. Her voice sounded careful, measured. "I just wanted to check in." "I'm okay," I replied. "I know," she said quickly. "I mean, how's work?" There it was, the tentative reach, not an apology. Not a celebration, just curiosity, fragile and unpracticed. "It's busy," I said. "Same as usual." She paused. "Your father watched the video again," she added. "He didn't say much?" "I'm not surprised," I said. Another pause, then he sent it to his brother. Didn't add anything, just the link. I closed my eyes briefly. My father didn't speak easily about feelings. He shared proof instead. Links, articles, evidence without vulnerability. "Okay," I said. After that, contact stayed minimal but different. My mother texted once a week. Short questions, neutral tone, no demands. My father sent 2 messages over the next month, brief. "Saw something about the Air Force on the news today. Thought of you." That was it. No praise, no apology, just a small acknowledgement that my life existed outside the box he'd put it in. Rachel stayed silent. At first, I braced for her return. A sarcastic message, a complaint about embarrassment, a reframing that put her back at the center. None of it came. Weeks passed. Then one night she finally texted. Not "How are you?" not "I'm sorry." Just, can you not let things like that happen without warning us? I stared at the screen, almost impressed by the consistency. She wasn't reaching for me. She was reaching for control. I typed carefully, calm enough to surprise myself. I didn't post it. The base did, and I warned you, I invited you. Her reply came fast. Yeah, but people were DMing me asking why I didn't go, like I'm a terrible sister. There it was, the only pain she could name, the kind that made her look bad. The old version of me would have softened it, would have tried to make her feel better so the discomfort would stop, but the old version of me was tired. I wrote one sentence. You're not a terrible sister because people saw my life, you're upset because you chose not to. The typing bubble popped up, disappeared, popped up again, then nothing. And for the first time I didn't chase it. 2 days later my mother texted again. Can we take you to dinner next weekend? Just us. We want to celebrate. Celebrate. The word looked strange on her screen, like a costume that didn't fit. And I knew what it was even if she didn't. Not celebration, damage control, a chance to feel caught up. For years, I'd dreamed of that invitation, of my parents wanting to celebrate me without being asked. But now it felt like someone trying to put a picture back in a frame after it had already fallen off the wall. And I realized something uncomfortable. If I said yes without boundaries, I'd teach them the same lesson they'd always learned, that my feelings were negotiable if they waited long enough. So I texted back, we can have dinner, but we're not doing it as a show. No photos, no posting, no speeches to the waiter about being proud. A minute later, of course, honey. We just want to be together. Maybe she meant it, maybe she didn't, but for once I wasn't guessing, I was choosing. The next weekend I met them at a small restaurant near home, nothing fancy. Neutral lighting, soft music that filled the space without demanding attention. Rachel was there, sitting stiffly like she didn't know where to put her hands. My father nodded once, the way he always did when he didn't know what else to do with feelings. My mother reached across the table and touched my wrist, not dramatic, just there. We talked about normal things at first, whether food, someone's neighbor is getting a new dog. My mother asked about my schedule in that careful way she had now, like she was learning how not to step on landmines. Halfway through the meal, my father cleared his throat and said something that almost made me laugh from shock. So, what do you actually do? He didn't say it like a joke. He didn't say it like a test. He said it like a man realizing he'd been living beside a locked door and finally wanted to know what was inside. I looked at him for a moment, at his hands. On the way, he kept his gaze slightly lowered, like eye contact made him vulnerable. I didn't give him acronyms. I didn't list awards. I didn't perform. I kept it simple. I make sure the right people have the right information at the right time so bad situations don't get worse. He nodded slowly, chewing like he was processing more than food. Rachel stared at her plate. My mother's eyes shined, not with tears, but with something close to regret. Then Rachel spoke, and her voice was quieter than I'd ever heard it. I didn't think it mattered, she said. I looked at her, not because I didn't understand the words, because I understood what was under them. She'd never imagined my life could be important without her noticing it. For a second, I wanted to say something sharp, something honest in the way knives are honest. I wanted to list all the times she'd laughed, all the times she'd made me feel like I was supposed to be grateful for being tolerated. But I didn't, because I wasn't trying to win anymore. I said it mattered even when you didn't notice. Rachel swallowed and nodded once, like she'd taken a hit she couldn't pretend didn't land. My father looked down at his plate for a long moment. Then he said, if you get recognized again, tell me, I'll come. It wasn't poetic, it wasn't a hug, it was I'm proud. But in my father's language, it was an apology with edges still on it. I didn't thank him, I didn't punish him, I just nodded. After dinner, in the parking lot, my mother hugged me in that tight, quick way she always did, like she was afraid if she held on too long she'd break into feelings she didn't know how to manage. Drive safe, she said. Rachel stood a few feet away, hands in her pockets. Hey, she said, like the word tasted unfamiliar. Hey, I replied, and that was it. Driving back to base, I realized something that surprised me more than the dinner itself. I wasn't bracing. I wasn't shrinking. I wasn't rehearsing how to be acceptable. I was just existing at full size. Back in my apartment, I took the medal out and held it for a moment. The ribbon was smooth under my thumb. The medal felt cool and solid. Then I placed it in a drawer, not the childhood drawer filled with forgotten things. My drawer, a drawer where important things went to rest safely. When I closed it, the sound was different. Not dismissal, not forgetting, just peace. In the weeks that followed, my mother asked better questions. Not questions with an agenda, not questions designed to steer me back toward a life she understood, but questions that sounded like genuine curiosity. How long are your days? Are you sleeping enough? Do you like the people you work with? My father stayed distant but not dismissive. When he texted, it was brief and practical. Saw an article about the Air Force supporting disaster relief. That coordination matters. It wasn't about me, and somehow that made it mean more. Rachel stayed mostly quiet. And at first I thought that silence would hurt. I thought I'd miss the noise, the attention, even the negative kind. But then I realized something I hadn't expected. I didn't miss her voice in my head. For most of my life, Rachel had been the measuring stick. Even when I stopped competing, I carried her shadow. Without her commentary, the silence felt lighter. Less crowded. One afternoon at work, my supervisor caught up with me in the hallway. "How's your family doing?" she asked. I thought about it. "They're adjusting," I said. She smiled knowingly. "That's usually how it goes." It struck me then how many people had lived versions of this story, not just in the military, anywhere the sacrifice didn't translate into dinner table language. Anywhere work mattered more than optics. Anywhere you could be essential and still feel invisible at home. Later that evening, my mother called. "I talked to your aunt today," she said. "She mentioned the video." I waited. "She said it must have taken a lot of trust for your supervisor to put your name forward," my mother continued. "I didn't realize it worked like that." "It does," I said gently. There was a pause and then she said, quieter, "I should have asked more." There it was, not a perfect apology. Not the words I used to rehearse hearing, but an opening. "I'm here now," she added like she was testing the sentence. "I know," I said. After we hung up, I sat on my couch and let the quiet settle around me. Not the heavy quiet of being ignored, a different kind. The kind that shows up when you stop performing for approval and start living for truth. People don't always change because you explain yourself better. Sometimes they change because reality arrives without your permission and stays. I thought about the younger version of myself, the one who kept offering pieces of her life like proof. The one who waited for recognition that never came. If I could speak to her now, I wouldn't tell her to try harder. I'd tell her to stop translating. Because here's the truth I learned too late to make it easier, but early enough to make it useful. You cannot force people to value what they've already decided to minimize. What you can do is live in a way that no longer requires their agreement. The distance between me and my family didn't disappear, it clarified, it took shape. And once it had a shape, it stopped hurting. It became something I could navigate, something I could choose. There's a moment after a long day when the bass quiets down in a particular way. Engines stop, hallways empty, lights hum softly, steady and indifferent. It's the kind of quiet that doesn't ask anything of you, it just exists. That's when I usually take a breath and take stock. The ceremony had come and gone, the video had made its slow rounds. My family had adjusted awkwardly, imperfectly in their own time, and what surprised me wasn't their reaction, it was mine. I didn't feel triumphant, I didn't feel vindicated, I didn't feel like I'd finally won anything. I felt steady, the kind of steady that doesn't need an audience. Honor, I realized, isn't something your family gives you. It's something you carry when you keep showing up anyway. My parents never sat me down and said they were wrong. They never used the words I once wanted. They didn't have to. Their shift was subtler than that. Less satisfying maybe, but more honest. My mother asked better questions. My father stopped minimizing. Rachel didn't become my cheerleader, and I stopped needing her too. That might not sound like a fairy tale ending, but it's the truest kind I know. There's a particular relief that comes when you stop expecting people to become who you needed them to be. It's not a resignation, it's clear. You see them as they are, not as a problem to solve, but as a boundary to respect. And boundaries, I learned, can be acts of love too. I kept serving. I kept doing the work that mattered. I mentored younger airmen who reminded me of myself, quiet, capable, unsure if their contributions were being noticed. I told them what I wished someone had told me sooner. You don't have to be loud to matter, you just have to be consistent. Sometimes they nodded, sometimes they didn't. Either way, the words were planted. On weekends, when I visited home, the conversations were calmer now, shorter, less sharp. We talked about the weather, food, and the neighbor's remodel. Occasionally, my work came up not as a point of debate, but as a fact. That was enough. One afternoon, my father handed me his phone without saying much. He'd pulled up an article about an Air Force unit supporting disaster relief. He pointed at it and said, "This kind of coordination matters." It wasn't about me. And somehow that made it mean more than any compliment. I thought again about that drawer from my childhood, the one where my certificate went to rest among spare batteries and forgotten manuals. For a long time, I believed that drawer was a verdict. That being placed there meant I was temporary, replaceable, easy to overlook. Now I understand something different. That drawer was never about my worth. It was about what my family knew how to value at the time and what they didn't. I don't take my medal out often. It stays where I put it, safe and unremarkable. Not everything needs to be on display to matter. When I look at it, I don't think about the comments or the tagging or the uncomfortable dinner. I think about the long days, the quiet decisions. The trust placed in me when things were uncertain. That was the real reward. If you've ever invited people to see your life and watched them choose something else, I want you to hear this clearly. You are not required to convince anyone of your worth, not your parents, not your siblings, not the people who only understand success when it looks like theirs. Sometimes the most respectful thing you can do for yourself is stop explaining and start living. People change slowly, if at all. Families adjust in increments, not leaps. And sometimes the best outcome isn't a dramatic reconciliation, it's peace. The kind that comes from knowing who you are without needing consensus. I didn't need my family to stand up and clap. I needed to stand firm when they didn't. And in doing that, I found something far more durable than approval. I found myself.